Again this evening. Marilyn is recording it for us. Just a couple of quick notes before I turn you over to Shelly. On Sunday, the Hollywood Historical Society will be back at our library doing their presentation at 1. On Tuesday, the 16th, don't forget we have Linda Levin's book discussion group about the goddess of Warsaw. On the 28th, I'm not including everybody in this, but I bet you we all could use this. We have something going on with the library called Aging with Knowledge, What Everyone Should Know. That's at 2 o'clock, so that might be a pretty good thing. Our annual Friends meeting is on Tuesday, the 30th from 6 to 45. And we actually have a reporter coming from Channel 6 to talk to us, which ought to be really pretty cool. And you guys don't forget, the holidays are coming up. And we have a massive book sale coming up on October 19th. We had one of our longtime members, board member, wonderful contributor to the library, left us hundreds and hundreds of books when she passed away, and they are fabulous books. So think about the holidays. This will be a great way to get presents for people, or heck, just yourself. So this was a very interesting movie. I've had a lot of people get me aside and talk to me already about it, so it ought to be really interesting to see what Shelly has to say. So Shelly, if you will you take it away?
Sure. Thank you,
And you guys don't
Jackie.
forget to mute yourself.
Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see you. Yes, this is a film. As Jackie said, she hopes to see a lot of hands. I do as well. And the Farewell, My Concubine has been considered by critics, by festivals, by the community of filmmakers, and by audiences, a film that changed everything. A film that changed everything. And it requires context. You know, we have to remember where this film is coming from, when it was coming, and so what it represents. In 1993, Farewell, My Concubine took the international film world by storm. It didn't just win awards, it dominated them. The film secured both the Golden Palm at the Cannes International Film Festival and the Film Critics Award as well. It was nominated for 2 Oscars and ultimately won a total of 24 major international awards. This wasn't just the film, it was an epic historical document and a deeply personal story that resonated with audiences around the world. The director had a personal connection to this film. His name is Chen Kaige, and he was born in 1952. His life was profoundly shaped by Chairman Mao's Cultural Revolution, which began in 1966. At just 14 years old, Chen was forced to publicly denounce his father, a respected filmmaker, as the revolution sought to eliminate bourgeois elements of society. Like millions of other students, Chen was sent to remote countryside for re-education, where he endured grueling physical labor alongside the peasants. After Mao's death in 1976, Chen was finally able to return to Beijing almost a decade later. He attended the Beijing Film Academy, which had been closed during the entire Cultural Revolution. Upon graduation, which, by the way, you should know, everything Western was eliminated from China. Music, books, thought, anything associated with the Western world was eliminated from China. So these people were kept under lock and key, so to speak. But he was able, they reopened the Beijing Film Academy, and he became part of what was known as the 5th generation of Chinese filmmakers. They began making innovative, highly acclaimed films that, unlike earlier communist propaganda, offered social critiques. Their work was more ambiguous, exploring China's long history of authoritarian rule, women's oppression, and how difficult it is to effect social change. Now, much like, we were dealing with Iran, this situation was even worse in the way they would ban films, in the way they would treat their filmmakers during the Cultural Revolution. With Farewell, My Concubine, Chen continued this examination of, as I said, authoritarian rule, women's oppression, and social change. He continued his examination on epic scale. This is an epic film, thanks to international funding and collaboration with Hong Kong artists. At that time, Hong Kong was still a part of Great Britain. So it was not, they were working independently of China, of communist China. This film is a story that spans half a century. The film spans 50 years of Chinese history, beginning in the 1920s. We follow the story of these two young boys, Duzi and Shitu, as they were known as young children, who are left at the Beijing Opera School. One is there already, one is abandoned by his mother. They endure brutal physical and emotional abuse, as we've seen, from their teachers, and their only solace is their care and affection for each other. As they grow up, Daozi, now called Dai, is trained for female roles, while Shitu, now Zhaolu, plays heroic male roles. And all roles in Beijing opera are traditionally performed by men. As young men, they achieve celebrity status, performing that opera, Farewell, My Concubine. The opera tells the well-known story, just to refresh, of Zhang Yu, played by Zhaolu, and his concubine, Lady Yu, played by Dai in the play. Now, this is one of probably the most famous opera in China. It relates to history. It does take liberties with the history, but it's a very historical drama, which for a long time had been a mainstay in Chinese opera and also studied in history. And in the last dance of the opera, for Zhang Yu, before taking her own life, she demonstrates her unwavering fidelity to the military man. Dai sees a connection between this play and his own life. We see him desiring to live out his days with Zhao Lu, just as the characters do. But when Zhao Lu marries the prostitute Zhu Xian, this creates a tragic love triangle that drives the film towards its devastating conclusion. Dai's passion for his art and his longing to preserve his childhood bond with Zhao Lu create the central conflict of the film, setting him at odds with Zhao Lu, Zhu Xian, and the rapidly changing world around them. The rigid and violent nature of their training is a key part of the film. Their teacher, Master Guan, brutally forces them into the desired forms. Dai's identity is brutally shaped for female roles, a process that includes a symbolic castration when his mother cuts off the finger. That is to be seen as a symbolic castration, because if you remember, the teacher even raises his pinky when discussing that he would not fit into the opera. There needed to be changes. And there is a symbolic rape when Zhao Lu forces the metal pipe into his mouth, and you see him bleed as a result of it. And then there is an actual rape by a court eunuch. We also see how their performances gain the attention of powerful figures like Master Wan, a wealthy opera patron who sponsors them, but also hints at a romantic and possibly non-consensual relationship with Dai. We see the past and present collide in this film. Throughout the film, the opera performances act as a reminder of the continuity of Chinese tradition, despite the swiftly changing face of history. Dai and Zhao Lu perform the same movements and songs for over 50 years, even as their audiences and the setting shift dramatically, from street corner for pennies to a eunuch's lavish compound to the popular theater, and then to a stage dominated by Japanese soldiers and later communist imagery. The theater ultimately becomes a space for political struggle, with the stage being used to publicly denounce those deemed counter-revolutionary during the revolution. Visually, the film contrasts the symbolic two-dimensional world of the opera. It is a two-dimensional world with the radiant, dynamic world outside the stage, both in dress and feelings. Director Chen Kaiga shoots the opera scenes with a fixed camera. If you're looking at the film, it's a fixed camera, while the outside world is filled with lights, shadows, and a sense of depth. The camera follows the character through what we can only consider labyrinthine alleys, streets, the way we see these streets, and the crowd scenes suggest the restless flow of humanity in the film. It is a cycle of violence and betrayal. The violence of the Cultural Revolution echoes the physical abuse of their childhood. It is a doubling in the film. When Zhao Lu is interrogated, he repeatedly slaps himself, just as they were forced to do as children. They are paraded and forced to kneel in a way that recalls their brutal punishments at the opera school. Despite the Communist Party's promise to purge China's ancient traditions, the film suggests the old and the new societies are more similar than they appear. The same rigid hierarchy and cruelty remain. However, there is one striking difference, and that being loyalty. In the old society, Dai Yi and Zhao Lu were fiercely loyal to each other. They called each other brother. They tended to one another's injuries, and even attacked their teacher to protect one from the other, to protect one another. These bonds of loyalty were at the center of the Confucian relations that governed the old society. They were also at the heart of the opera itself. In stark contrast, when Dai Yi and Zhao Lu are denounced during the Cultural Revolution, their once unbreakable bond now shatters. The former brothers turn on each other, spilling secrets and accusations in front of a seething crowd. Zhao Si, if you remember, the young boy that Dai Yi saved from abandonment, has grown up to become a Red Guard. He participates in forcing Zhao Lu's confession, and later is seen by other Red Guards admiring Dai Yi's jewelry and acting out the opera, suggesting he will be punished for this act of bourgeois expression. Zhao Lu cruelly rejects Zhu Xian, who, unable to bear the betrayal, winds up taking her own life, just as Zhao Lu and Dai Yi's childhood friend at the school did, by hanging themselves. Such betrayals were all too common during the Cultural Revolution, as people were pressured to inform on their own family and friends to prove their devotion to the state. The tragic ending and the brilliant performances that we see in the film, it's years later, and we've circled around because it takes us back to the opening scene when they're just bathed in light in this arena. In the immediate aftermath of the Cultural Revolution, Dai Yi and Zhao Lu have a final performance. Their makeup, their movements and songs are the same. But now Dai Yi finally sees the true complexities and contradictions of the opera, the violence and suffering behind this heroic tale, and the impossible choices women face. For the first time in his life, he makes the performance, when he takes the sword, truly his own. The film's power comes from its extraordinary performances. Leslie Chung, who plays Dai Yi, gives a nuanced portrayal, conveying his vulnerability and isolation, even at the height of his stardom. Chung doesn't simply play Lady Yu. He plays Dai Yi playing Lady Yu, infusing the role with Dai Yi's loneliness and longing. a beloved Hong Kong actor and singer, Chung, tragically committed suicide in 2003 at the age of 48. He was one of the biggest stars in Hong Kong. Hundreds of thousands of people turned out to pay their respects to him. He had lived with depression most of his life, and he had risen to the heights of celebrity. Zhang Fengyi provides a quietly powerful performance as Zhao Lu. His strong physical presence contrasts with Chung's slightness and has earned him acclaim. He has also earned acclaim in a number of roles, both in films and on television, in Hong Kong and in mainland China. And of course, Gong Li, one of international cinema's most acclaimed actresses, brings complexity, resilience, and depth to her role as Jushan. She tries to hold the relationship between the two men together, ultimately facing tragedy under the changing political landscape that we see in the film. Her performance won her the New York Film Critics Circle Award, as many other Chinese awards and nominations for many others. The film is a complex one, I will not argue. It is, first of all, a beautifully shot film, probably one of the most beautifully shot films I've ever seen. And it requires an understanding of the importance of opera in this film, and we see it, even though it's performed, and we see during the Cultural Revolution how they're trying to take the opera and change it. By the way, during the Cultural Revolution between 66 and 76, Madame Mao used to hand out cards at the opera and let the people decide how they wanted to see the opera performed, how they wanted, what they wanted taken out, what they wanted put in. Okay, a total communist view of changing art, of affecting art. Okay, and this, it finally, after it was overturned, they went back to the original art form, which, for the Chinese is almost a sacred art form. It's beautifully performed. There is acrobatics. There are all the things we've seen in the film. Yes, of course, to us, sometimes the voices do affect us, do affect Westerners, maybe in negative ways, but as you see them, you can grow used to it. It's a very interesting art form, a colorful one to say the least. And the makeup is astounding, and we see it in the film as they apply it to each other. I don't have to go through every scene, but there is a collection of scenes in this film that are wonderfully done. And we see the sadness in Dai. Not only was it difficult and he repeats that line, I was born a natural boy. I was born a natural boy. Even though he, becomes, or he is homosexual in the film, and it was very difficult. You can imagine the difficulty in the making of the film, how Chen Kaige had to portray it. It never once comes out, but we understand it. We have to be aware of certain things, that it is a Chinese film shot during communist China. It was, in 93. It was when China was first opening up, which is one of the reasons the film was able to get made. The then president of China, prime ministers of China, allowed the film to get made. Then it was banned. It was actually banned in China for a long number of years, until finally they did let it play with some cuts. But this is the uncut version, which you saw, the updated version with all the subtitles properly put in. And the music score is wonderful. The acting, I do not have to stress. So now that's my take on the film. I think it invites more of the discussion, as Jackie said, which I hope you will do. So why don't we dig right in there? Who would like to go first? with their feelings about the film that I can hopefully answer or discuss with you. Who wants to go first? This is always the toughest, is breaking the ice. Ah, there we go. Yeah, Larry Lefkowitz. You got to unmute, Larry.
Got it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, speaking to you from Los Angeles, where we're on a family affair and business.
I know.
It's nice to be able to see this. This was one of the better films I've ever seen. I love the filming and I love the acting, and it just moved me very much.
Terrific. Terrific. Well, it's, and I know the question sits there is, why did he recommend this film? I know that some people might feel that way. Okay, because these are films that I think are important in understanding a culture. And looking, and as I remember as a kid, or even older, when I used to watch NBC, a show on NBC, afterwards they would come in, especially a historical show, they would come in afterwards. I don't know if you remember, they'd say, now read all about it. Read all about it. Dig into what you saw in the film. Look at the history. Understand the context of what's being done. And I think this film does it. That if you may look at it, you may not understand all that's happening, but maybe it'll force you to think about it and look into some of it. Try and understand what happened. And we have enough resources today to do it online, as to look into the history of the Communist Party, look into the history of China. The first part of the film is dealing with what we call Royal China, with the dynasty. And then we go into World War II with the Japanese, and then we come out with the communists. It's a country that's lived under a lot of different kinds of rule, yet there are striking similarities between each rule in terms of how they affected their population. And I think it's important to look at it that way. It's also a beautifully produced film. It's a beautifully performed film. And it is a moving film that, doesn't just teach us about Chinese society, but teaches us about ourselves as human beings. The bond that the two boys form, friendship, understanding beyond what they feel, how they feel about each other, and then how they feel about themselves and how everybody looks at them. All of these reflections within the film, I think, are important. Okay, who's Barbara Tate?
I've missed a couple because also something wrong with my back, little back surgery there. I'm fine. But I thought, well, let me catch up. And I saw this movie was 3 hours. I thought, oh my God, I have no love for Chinese opera. I just can't, I can't enjoy it. And I said, well, I'm just going to plow through it. And I was just mesmerized by it. And I did find it difficult to follow. I did have to look up some things now and again and put some dates in order. My knowledge of Chinese history is rudimentary, but there was just nothing about the film that just didn't. I was just entranced, loved it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, as I said at the beginning, for Chen Kaige, it is a deeply personal film. I mean, as a 14-year-old boy, he did denounce his father, who was imprisoned for a while. He was sent, like millions of other kids, to the hinterlands of China to work every day. And when he came back, he finally did reconcile with his father. It was sad. Many families were broken up during the revolution. And we see, that scene in the film, and it is a marvelously shot scene when the two of them are taken in front of the crowds, and first Dai and then Zhao Lu, and how he's forced to denounce Jushan, who's standing there watching all of this, is this is what it was like. This really captures the reality of what happened during the Cultural Revolution. They really acted this way. They were merciless in carrying out Chairman Mao's orders, merciless. So that's what we see in the film, but it is their performances in the production, and this is a film that really fits. I know a lot of you might not go back to it, but this is one of those films that does fit how I feel about looking at cinema. That this is a film you just have to watch for the first time, and then if you do go back, you can really see it and then understand it even more. Karen.
Yes, one thing that struck me is the when the young boy ran away and they went to see the opera, how he was that was I believe when he determined that that was what he wanted to do, and he was willing to endure anything to achieve that goal. And it's like a trait that's like and almost any successful person, even though that was dance, but any other, if they want to be a doctor or something else, it's that trait that will get them where they want to go. And it was beautiful. I guess I had a little trouble following it. I wanted to hear what other people would say, so I wasn't going to say anything, but I did want to mention that was something I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
About the young boy. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think, and it's how he's forced into his role, but then begins to accept it because he knows he's different.
Right.
Because he knows he's different.
Yeah.
And he begins to accept that role. And then seeing how she too behaves towards him, forces him into this bond. First there's a love of a child, one child for another, and then growing up and becoming so delusional that the opera takes hold of him and makes him extend the idea of an opera, extend the idea of that role into reality, for him is really touching, really touching. Thank you, Karen. Who's next? Marilyn, do I see your hand? You got to unmute, Marilyn.
Unmute. Oops, we lost.
Don't disappear. Oh, okay.
Are they there?
I don't know.
We're in trouble.
Okay.
There they
sorry.
are.
There. Okay, we hear you.
Oh, and you hear, you can't see, but you can hear me. Okay.
Yes.
What I love is that each time I see another show of you, the selections are so great. I always gain some information about the culture. And truly in this one, of course, I learned so much about the opera because Mel and I in China did attend an opera, and it was very piercing. The sound was just piercing, and we loved it visually. It was beautiful. We didn't understand it. Through this film, I do understand that much more. And so I appreciate learning, each time you make a presentation. So I want to thank you. And I thought it was wonderful. I really, really enjoyed it.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sandra, yeah.
Shelley, would you talk about the ending for me? I wasn't sure what happened. I know it went back to the beginning and they were in this big hall and I don't know who was interrogating them. If you could talk about that. It was a beautiful film.
They weren't so much interrogating as saying they were going to give a performance at the opera for whoever was there, and it's sort of bringing everything. It's interesting how he uses it as a bookend device. It's where they started from and where they end up. Except in the end, Dai realizes that he can't. And if you remember, he said they were separated for a number of years. And now they'd come back together to do the role. And what Dai is feeling is that she, he is actually operating now in love for her. And, she has to make the sacrifice to let him go. It's the purest form of love is at that point, in order for him to be free, has to make the sacrifice, and didn't realize that all along, that she was freeing him. He was the character that Dai plays, Lady Yu, and now he takes the sword. The character, she takes the sword and slits her own throat.
She really,
Yeah, she does kill herself. I mean,
Yeah.
that sword is a device throughout the film.
I was
If you
just going
remember
to
when they
mention
first
that
see
the
it,
sword
yeah.
appeared a lot of times. Yeah.
Yeah. And she
Yeah.
gives, what's interesting is after they're denounced and Dai is lying there in the street, she gives him back the sword. She throws the sword down at his feet,
Yes. Yes.
so in essence, giving him back, the power. But she's also giving up. In a sense, she's also slitting her own throat. I mean, when she goes in at that point and hangs herself. So, it is tragic opera. It is
It is.
tragic opera. Yeah, what we're seeing here. So I hope that helped. Okay,
It helped. I was in
good.
China in the 1980s,
1986.
in the middle 1980s. So that would be around the end of the Cultural Revolution.
That's 10 years after. 86 is 10 years after the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah. So there was nothing in China. It
Yeah.
was barren. We were in Beijing. They were in these green outfits. They had only bicycles. There was no commerce. People had their own block of the street that they had to sweep. It was quite something to see. I often wish we could go back to see what happened. I remember seeing little kids, babies with holes in their pants because they didn't have diapers, so they would just pee through the little holes. I never got to go back. I wondered what it, but it was really something. We did see a circus, sort of Peking circus in Shanghai, but it was interesting for sure.
Yeah, it's you'd be surprised. It's changed quite a bit. I
I
mean,
would think.
physically, it's a modern megalopolis, which they're having trouble with, but it is very different. It's not the uniformity that you saw during the Cultural Revolution or even
Oh.
those years after in terms of clothing. That we even see in the film, the Red Guard they wore Mao jackets. That's all they could wear. There was communist uniformity.
Yeah.
That's changed.
Yeah, there
That's
was,
changed.
they had these little holes in their buildings or something, and that was the little bit of commerce where they could trade. And the only place you could buy anything was called a friendship store, where a
Mhm.
tourist could go in there. It was interesting. I felt like we visited the old China before. And there was nothing in the temple of the moon, everything, the jade, everything was gone.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wonder if they ever brought it back or.
I am sure
And-
that some of it has been restored.
Yeah.
The funny thing about the Cultural Revolution and what was going on in China, what happened even afterwards, I was there about 6 years after the Cultural Revolution, and everybody had a TV. TV was
When I-
prominent during that period, but there was only one channel,
Yeah.
and that was Mao's channel. That's all they would see. So they had no idea what was going on TV in the rest of the world. It's ironic that they had this TV, but it was just literally the face of Mao, just literally the face of Mao.
What year was that?
That was in 83.
83. So I was a
83.
few years after that, 86. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was nothing like the.
Nothing.
Anyways.
No, it's true. It's true.
Interesting movie.
Thank
Very
you.
interesting. Very
Thank you.
colorful.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Color is prominent in the film and has a lot of meaning as well. Thank you. Jackie.
Well, I thought the opening scene was so dramatic. It just pulled you in. You go from when they're in the opera house and all of a sudden they're in the dark and all of a sudden the light comes on. It just makes you realize that they're going to be shedding light on a story that you really want to watch. However, I may be the only person who will say this. I thought it was unnecessarily long. I thought a lot of the scenes just went on and should probably have been cut a little bit. And I didn't enjoy it as much as everybody else did. I mean, I'm certainly open to the culture. The sound didn't bother me. I thought the colors were beautiful. I thought the filming was beautiful. I just thought it was awfully long and kind of not really necessary to be that long to tell the story that they wanted to tell.
Well, I will tell you, you know, first and foremost that the films are made typically for their own culture. And each of these cultures, Asian, especially Asian cultures, they are used to a long form. India, among them, Korea, they're all very into what we call long form programming, and it happens in their cinema as well. That when they come to the cinema, they like a long story. They like to really cover, you know, to see something really build in terms of character, in terms of it's almost their novelization, a way to see a novel on screen. And this was a novel, by the way. This was adapted from a novel, and so it really, you know, and this is the culture. So we're really seeing the culture and what it represents in cinema. And I think it's important to understand that, you know, we're used to 90 minutes. We're used to maybe 2 hours, you know, unless it's a blockbuster that they say, and today they do different kinds of blockbusters, but unless it's, you know, a Ben-Hur or a Ten Commandments or a Gone with the Wind, those are exceptions. Whereas they're the norm. In those cultures, they were the norm. And many ways they still are. They've cut their films for American audiences, and if you were to cut this film down, it wouldn't have the same import, the same impact that it has in terms of its culture.
It would be interesting to see if that really is the case, Shelley. I mean, obviously we could never know that, but I'm just not as sure that I agree with that. I mean, I see your point and I respect that, but it would be interesting to see if that really were the case.
Well, again, that's a cultural dissonance, because if you saw it without it, you wouldn't know what wasn't there. And even though you say it's drawn out for purpose. It's drawn out for characterization, for understanding the people. You know, yes, there are scenes that are long. And it's not so much that the director is not knowing where to cut the scene, but he has to let it go. He feels, you know, this is also a director's point of view, has to let the scene go. It has to fill, you know, he has to fill what his feelings are with these characters and their relationships to each other. I mean, it's like reading a long novel. You know, sometimes you feel like, you know, this is, you know, 600 pages. I could have done without 200 of them. But that's the way it is. You know, it's like someone, when you say to me, well, the film is, you know, the film seems slow. Well, yes, it could be slowly paced. And it's slowly paced for a reason. Film is slowly paced for a reason, for us to absorb certain things. You know, it's the way we look at cinema, the way our culture looks at cinema. It's different from reading a book. It's different from being exposed to this long form as a regular occurrence. It's here. It's there. It is there. It's a regular occurrence. I mean, the opera lasts a long time when you go to it. So it's really giving us a view of a culture, totally, which is one of the exceptions of this film, is that it became so accessible to people around the world to look at it, and other cultures as well, looking at it from their point of view. Whether it be an Asian culture or European culture, but they saw things in there, you know, that we as Westerners are used to in our culture, which is totally divorced. This is totally divorced from. So it's a whole different idea to us, and sometimes it is difficult to stay with it. As you say, to cut it, could you cut it down a little bit? And some films are. I mean, I'm doing a film presentation in one of my other classes. The film is 6 hours long, but it's divided into 2 3 hour parts. And yet every time I've done it, there's been a tremendous reception for it. It happens to be Italian, so there are some similarities that we could look at, but it's still, I think these films deserve to be seen in their entirety, and that's my feeling of justification for it. Okay, Sandra Lefkowitz.
Hi. I think one of the things that you described in your just what you said recently is how I felt about the film. It could be broken up into chapters if it were a book, obviously. And if you looked at other films like this, like The Red Shoes, or there are films that I thought about throughout the film, because from the very beginning, when his finger is cut off, I knew I was not watching an American film or a Western film, that I was watching something other. And I am a little bit familiar with Asian culture, so it wasn't shocking to me, and I learned much through your commentary. But one of the things that I think a film like this does, excuse me, it embraces the individual growing up in a society. And that society is not the society that we are at all familiar with. And what the film does, and it couldn't do it without the length. I agree with you. I think that it needed the expansion of each of the parts so that you would begin to realize that from the beginning to the end, the culture of the society may have changed some of its philosophical and political opinions, but it really didn't change. That there were things that happened to the individual that even in our history with all of its terrible events would happen differently. It would happen more to other rather than to family. The solutions of the characters were very different from solutions of our past and or solutions that people would see as our present. And I think that it's very hard to stop ourselves at home, particularly because we're seeing our films isolated. We're seeing them almost as an entertainment form, when in fact, these filmmakers were doing much more than entertaining. They were making films to let people know what was happening in their culture to individuals. So they have to create the culture, they have to create the individual, and they have to create the connection. And I think that the beauty of the film for me was that it was much more than an entertainment, that it was someone who explained that they didn't know that much about Asia before, but was stimulated to learn more. I think that when we start to think that way, we learn more about ourselves, because we learn what we don't know and where where the pitfalls are. And we look at the way our situations are quite differently when we're aware of other cultures. So I think that the film, I understand why someone may have felt it was long, but it was. But during the watching of the film, because I was set up to look at it differently. And I think when we approach foreign films, particularly Asian films, as the Japanese films, that's not our society. And as I said, I could liken it a little bit to The Red Shoes, because the passion with which the dancer is taken away by her need to dance is real. It was no less real for the opera people. It was that same human instinct that we all share. The solutions are what's different. And so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well said. It's while you were talking, I was thinking, we have to remember also that China, most of the people didn't read. They couldn't read. They never learned, and therefore cinema becomes their school, becomes their book, becomes their ability to access their own culture in certain ways. And I think that's, what these filmmakers see. There was a great African filmmaker, his name was Osmani Sembeni, who made some very, very vibrant, very powerful films, which, I know a lot of you would, again, call slow. And aren't, because he's revealing his culture. And he used to say about his films, and I love the way he put them into context. He used to take them around Africa and show them on, put up a sheet if he didn't have a screen, and show them the films. He said, my films are night school for Africa. My films are night school for Africa, because it was a way of showing people in different parts of Africa about their own continent and about their own lives. And this is, in essence, is part of the same thing, part of the same idea of what they're doing. So, that's why we have that. So thank you, Sandra. Marilyn? Oh, I'll get back to you, Larry. Sorry, I'll get back to you. Go ahead, Marilyn.
So my question is, looking at the culture and looking at the population, how did the Chinese people react to this film? Because who attended it? Who did it affect? I can, like, it happened, and then part of it was banned, and like, through their culture, did they see it and then they couldn't see it and then they could see it again? And was it the upper echelon of the people who saw it to really appreciate, like, it's a culture that is so different, and this is dealing with opera, which I don't see it being there for the average man. Who was this geared to watch, and do the Chinese see this as the rest of the world as an amazing film?
The answer is yes. It was, first of all, it was banned. It didn't really play. Deng, who was the president of China, he very much liked the film, and I think he was the president and the prime minister didn't want it at all, and therefore it was banned in China. So they just didn't see it. Finally, when the ban was lifted and they saw it, it was a very popular film. This was their lives. This was their culture. This was their opera. This opera, Chinese opera is a vastly loved art form in China.
Did the rest of the world see it before the Chinese people saw it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Now it makes sense.
Of course.
Okay.
Well, it came to Cannes. It opened at the Cannes Film Festival, where it received all these accolades. And then it came to the US, where
And China
again,
hadn't seen it yet.
China, no. China hadn't seen it for about 10
okay.
years.
Okay.
Yeah, China hadn't seen it for about 10 years. So, China is, again, it was a closed society. So it was, and again, it was just opening up in terms of education in China. US companies were finally coming in towards the end of the century. So no, they hadn't been exposed to
now
it
it
yet.
makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, and it was very popular. This is their, this is their society. This is who they are. In essence, they're seeing it, and they're seeing their history. They didn't want, certainly China after the Cultural Revolution didn't want to relive that period, whether it be in film or whatever. So now he is reliving the period. It's like, whereas it took a long time for Germany to come to face the fact of what they did and do it in cinema. So we have the same situation here. You don't want to relive the worst period of your existence, so to speak, and it's the modern era. So yeah, I mean, these are things we have to take into consideration, when discussing the film.
When did it come to China?
I think it was 2000, either 2001, 2003.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
it took a while. It took a
Whoa.
while. Yeah, yeah.
Whoa. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Marilyn. Larry Lefkowitz?
All art forms have a traditional form which some people rebel against.
Yes.
They can be political or non-political, or most art is political in one way or another. But I think the director was very much aware of what he was doing. He looked at opera with great respect. And one of the things that moved me, the opera patron, the elegant man, was discussing the nature of the opera. He said, does he take 3 steps or 4 steps before
Right.
he turns? I mean, that's something that they respect. I don't think that it's necessary for all people, and other artists might say, who cares? Let's improvise a bit. But in that art form at that time, it was very important to do it exactly right. And I think that there's an homage to in the film to that tradition.
Oh, definitely. That not only that, but it's really a big part of the film itself is the idea that the opera survives. The opera survives. They tried to change it during the Cultural Revolution, and naturally the Cultural Revolution failed, along with their interpretations of the opera. During and they wanted to change the opera in terms of the dress. They didn't want to have the makeup. They didn't want to have the costumes. Which in a sense is saying we're going to rewrite your history. Cultural Revolution was going to rewrite Chinese history, and it didn't work. It didn't work. There's always those who sit there and say, I want to rewrite history. But you can't. You can't, especially with the billion or so people you're dealing with. And I think that's important to understand. And I think it's part of why why opera survives, why the stories survive in China, and why it's sort of built into them. It's built into their lives. And I mean, it's something, here we've gone through so many different art forms of theater that some are just forgotten. I mean, we don't do vaudeville anymore. We don't do burlesque anymore. But they evolved. We see some of our great playwrights, take those forms and refresh them in new ways. And I think that's important to understand about our culture. But we seem to forget a lot of what happened before. Certain societies have a kind of amnesia about things. So and just as you said, when he does discuss that, it's an expression of this is what people were feeling. This is what's the importance of this theater. Thank you, Larry. Who wants to go next? Anybody? Anybody have anything else they want to add? Well, I'm sorry, Jackie, you didn't get as many hands as you wanted.
I got as many what?
Hands, raising of the hands.
I
That's
know,
you.
really. It's like, come on, everybody. Well, I have a feeling, Shelley, that I'm not the lone dissenter in not caring for this movie.
Oh,
and
of
that's
course
okay.
not.
But
Of course
but
not.
even if I am, it's okay. Everybody's allowed. But I think that I think what you're going to find, particularly with movies like this, is people either loved it, which is the vast majority of tonight, or they didn't care for it. And that's okay too. So, it's always good to discuss it. And while we're saying that, Karen put in the chat that one of the things I like about foreign films is learning about other parts of the world. And I think that's probably one of the best comments to make, is because every movie you see introduces you to something that you may or may not have known. You may have been there, like Sandra, you were there, but you experienced something totally different. And so I think that's really very important, that we see things from other people's eyes, not just our own.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as Sandra Lefkowitz said, you know, we realize who we are sometimes by reflecting on another culture. Uh, we see that. Now, the next film, and I am staying with the Cultural Revolution because it is such a defining moment in modern Chinese history, and take you into a more, you know, modern version of how it was looked at, dealing just specifically with the Cultural Revolution, is Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress, which is based on, again, based on a best-selling book. It was an international bestseller, both here and abroad. And it deals with two young men, again, which is part of the theme of the film itself and part of the theme of what we're talking about here. It explores the transformative power of literature, interestingly enough, during China's Cultural Revolution. You know, books were banned, music was banned, instruments were banned, and these two young men who are sent to a remote mountain village for re-education, which is what Chen Kaiga went through, form a triangle with a local young seamstress, introducing her, and here's the interesting change, introducing her, a young woman, to Western culture, something which is totally verboten during this period. So it's a beautiful film, again, well acted, and gives us an interesting view. It's a much more, I think, will be a much more accessible film for you in terms of the characters. And it is wonderfully produced, beautifully shot. And I'll have some interesting things to tell you about its author and director, because they're one and the same. They're one and the same, which again is an interesting way of taking one's art form and then transforming it into another art form. So I will look forward to
Sounds
seeing
good.
you all then,
All right.
next 2
Well,
weeks.
thank you, everybody. Those celebrating,
Good night.
Happy New Year until we next see you. And,
Just before we leave, that's on September 25th. September
Right.
25th is the
Yeah.
next movie.
September 25th.
No,
Yes, it's between the holidays.
What's the name, Shelley?
Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress. It'll come in the email. And it's posted, I think it's posted on the Sterling website, Friends of the Sterling
It is.
website.
And it's in the newsletter, the calendar, Jackie's. It's, yeah.
We're putting
Everywhere.
posters up on 95. It'll be all over the place.
Well, yeah.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Thank you
everyone.
for coming.
Thank
Thank you. Take
On the
care. Have a good
25th.
holiday. Those celebrating. Thank you.
Bye.